Alright, so I did some driving on this thing, and I decided that it's finally time, it's getting nice out, to get the secondaries on this carb to open up. This engine does not pull enough vacuum at higher RPMs to lift the power valve in the secondaries to open them up, but it does work for the distributor. I noticed on the last drive it was doing some weird like fluctuations of throttle, and it turns out I forgot to plug this, I think they call it an EGR valve, and I noticed, it's kind of funny actually, when I stopped at the parts store to get another belt for the alternator, which I have the third one, brand new, and a voltage regulator, and it just started right up a little bit ago. But I noticed when I stopped to get those belts that there was a hissing noise, and I looked over here, and I guess I didn't catch it, that the hose wasn't on here, so gas was pouring out, because that's the lowest spot in that intake plenum right there. So there was just gas pouring on the engine. So that's probably why it got a little hot on the way home too. It was probably running too lean. I was getting excited that I wouldn't have to downsize the jets, but I think I might still have to. And that's my high idle. Just look at the size of these intake ports here. These are longer runners, and that's going to give me more low end power if I have it working properly. But so far that's proving to be hard. And then they've got these little guys that even it out. And I also, not only did I get the Duraspark 2 ignition put on there with the vacuum advance, I also got this fuel regulator. It was $35 from the store, and this fuel gauge, and it turns out my fuel pressure was around 12 psi, where it should be at around 5 psi. And when I get the proper adapter and I go up to O'Reilly's to rent the flaring tool, I'm gonna put that adjuster right down there so it's nice and firm, and then you can adjust it from there, and then have your gauge and look at it. And I do have this new coil, which is supposedly 50,000 volts, and you can actually hear it. I know that sounds silly, but you can literally hear the spark crack compared to the old one, where it was just kind of like a gentle little spark. So to start off, sorry it's a little windy, there's these cardboard gaskets that they made, because this was in a hot rod that they ended up replacing with a 454 V8, so I don't know why this was in that car. It was a really nice car, truck-ish type of deal. Not an El Covino, but some kind of homemade something. But there's this plate, which seems to be pretty flat, but I'm going to go ahead and check it twice, and then I'll get some real gasket instead of this testing material they had on there. And by the way, I did not come up with this idea. The man who did passed away. I bought this engine off of Craigslist with this setup and that carb for $50. Obviously it's cheaper because it probably wasn't working the best with this setup. The other motor that was in the truck originally, I was going to buy all kinds of performance parts and Clifford intakes and Clifford manifolds, 4-barrel carburetor, Holley, all kinds of stuff, and I didn't really know anything about that at that point. So I probably would have just wasted a lot of money and had crappy ignition and stuff like that still. But back then we took it to the machinist, neighborhood machinist, and he said that it was junk. And you know how that goes, talking to those Precision. You can just buy a long block reman. It's just a dying industry. So you can see this is the old gasket, and it has 8 holes, and that was causing it to leak out of these ones because the carb wasn't set up for that. So I cut my own out of this, and it looks pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and do that with whatever sheet I have left on the rest of the intake, except for the actual runners. They did a pretty good job on this. I can't change it though because of the screw pattern. It's a little too short for the carburetor to set on, but these spacers are cool. The only thing is I can't bolt it on there because they're a little bit taller, but I can't bolt it on there because of that pattern they put. They didn't know that it would cause that issue. They also missed a little bit with the holes, so I'm going to go ahead and fix those and make them perfect. Go ahead and tie this socket to a string and see if it's a 1/2 inch. It is a 7/16. not to get in the way of you guys. Gonna need to hit it a little harder than that. One freeze cap out. And also, I'm kind of glad I didn't listen to the people that said to mount the carb to where the choke plate, the primary butterflies are up in the front side, because as you can see there's like a little divider in here, and that wouldn't have been good. I mean, they kind of notched it out, but it just works out better for the throttle cable and me and everyone else. And when you hit it too hard, what you get is a freeze cap inside your intake, and that'll be a little bit hard to get out, but you just got to get it lined up and then pull it out with a pair of pliers or channel locks. The one thing I didn't think about with the holes is, look at how wide the plenum is versus the width of the gap between the holes. So you really couldn't actually do it directly into here without building some weird stuff over there and tapping and drilling. Oh my goodness. Well, I didn't see that coming. See, that's filled with JB Weld there. Like they accidentally drilled in the wrong place. Oh, I see what they did. They drilled for the plate, and then I guess the guy was a little bit old and he thought that he was drilling there. That was his pilot hole. Some weird stuff. I'm sure they did a lot of sanding to get this level, because it would probably be expensive to get the machinist to put it in the chuck like this. It's kind of big and weird shaped. Even just for the jet skis, they charged $80 because they said it was so hard to get it mounted. Just shave the heads, or head. I'm gonna let the air compressor load up a bit, and then I'm gonna start die grinding those holes out a little better. I was gonna see if this hole is plugged properly, but it won't even come out with the channel locks on the end of the Allen wrench here. I didn't remember it being this bad, but I guess it is. There's no play. I looked at the screws, and that's as far as it goes. So just need to work on that a little bit. And I don't think it's going to affect the velocity or whatever. The jets are already too big, so more air is better. There's also, I noticed, a little bit of an issue here with the sanding that they did. There's a little bit of a high spot here, so that's going to be addressed with the grinder. That's a lot of sanding that I don't feel like doing. It looks like they used a grinder actually, but it might have been one of those like 6-inch sander buffer deals. So I went ahead and looked at the alignment of these homemade holes on this homemade spacer with the carburetor, and they are a-okay. They're a little bit off, I might need to like chamfer the edges on some of the holes just a little bit. They made the holes a little bit bigger, which is okay too. But it's good for like a big carburetor like the one I have of 600 cubic feet per minute. This is definitely going to be the wackiest 4-barrel setup I've ever seen, except for the ones with the turbo. That's kind of weird, carbureted turbo. But I think I'm going to get rid of this spacer. Forgot what they call it, the difference between this type and this type. But I think that that's actually changing things, and we need to get a little bit of velocity going down into the plenum with each individual valve on the carburetor. So I'm going to end up getting rid of this and getting a classic style one with the 4 holes. The only problem with that is normally they're meant for a V8 intake, and they've got kind of like a the holes are drilled sideways, so it shoots it out into the cylinder banks. But I can find one, it's not that big of a deal. So I'm having a little bit of an issue here with just a $3 bit, I believe, die grinder bit from Ace, and a $15 die grinder from Fastenal. This thing screams. That's the best tool I've ever bought from them. But aluminum's kind of caking up on there, so I'll have to pick that out every once in a while. Alright, so I got that all cleaned up. What you're seeing here is not the actual plenum here. It's the way they used the hole saw drill bits to drill these holes. They were backing out and then it would move, so it's kind of got some weird lips on it, but I'm going to take those out in a little bit. But I got them all widened out, and I made them even on both sides as much as I could. And I also made them look smooth, but I didn't want to take too much off, so they're oddly shaped, not because of my work, but because of how they were before. And then I also sharpened that little divider right there. Can't really tell much, but it's super sharp. Oh, and a correction, I looked on the computer real quick, and the hose coming from the valve cover to the intake is actually a positive crankcase ventilation PVC, PCV, and that is why your oil cap, or the one on mine at least, is the actual filter. It actually sucks air down through there, so you probably already know that, but I forgot about it. And as long as it's sucking, it's actually a good thing that it's down that low, because it's going to bubble up the gas and kind of get it evaporated a little bit, so it's not just sitting down there forever. Actually, strangely, I was wrong. That's not JB Weld. I was noticing it got shiny when I scratched it, and it was a little soft too. JB Weld's not usually that soft. It is actually lead that they filled it with, which is kind of strange. I don't know much about electrolysis, but I thought that that was what happened when you did that. Or solder, who knows. And the way I do it is I just take a sharpened or sharper screwdriver and put it on the concrete floor and just hammer on it all the way around for each one, and it makes a perfect circle. Alright, so I got that cut out. It looks pretty sharp. Right size holes are all lined up, except the paper gets pushed back. I don't know if you want to call it paper, but the material on the outside gets pushed back a little bit, so you have to take a file, a rounded file, and just do that, get rid of it. So you can still hear a little bit of wobble there. but it's not as bad as it was before. It's just very minimal, and these gaskets do compress quite a bit. But I am going to put some sealer just around the bolt holes and just some thin little lines everywhere. So this is how much I have on there. I want to clean that up. A little dirty. Doesn't look like there's an issue, but I believe something's wrong. For some reason I thought that this was the front for a second, but this is the front. So it was just on there backwards. Fits great. I'm not going to show you me torquing this down because you saw it before, but just stick that socket wrench in there and then use a screwdriver. I got them all torqued down really tight, and I'm just going to clean up the silicone from the inside of here. Here's another quick one. Cut that out. It's easier to use a knife for me on this gasket while I'm down on the ground, but for the circles and the stuff on the inside, I just like mark it and then just eyeball, look at the hole, and take a hammer and a screwdriver. This is a little bit tough. It's not like it's crappy gasket sheet or anything. Now I've got to cut this one where the mass airflow sensor would go, or throttle body deal. For something real like curvy and like home cut looking like this, you just push it that way, and then when you cut it and slide it back up, it'll cover the gasket up, so you don't see gaskets sticking out in random places. Alright, so here's that with the cardboard in the background. Alright, so I got those two on there, and that's all for this video.